You do? Okay. Everyone knows. All right, here we go. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari and Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Mr. Paramahansa Purajikacharya Ashtotar to the Srimad's Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Purajikacharya Ashtotar to the Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. So we'll be on page 669. 669. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Now, just to make sure. Oh, text 12. Yes. Okay. Well, I guess it's on page 669, the top of page 669. Okay. On this 20th day of June, 2023 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are studying chapter 18 entitled Conclusion, the Perfection of Renunciation. And we are in text 12, which begins on bottom of 668 and continues on 669. Okay. Anishtam, Ishtam, Mishram, Cha, Chividham, Karmana, Palam, Bhavati, Atyaginam, Praitya, Natu, Sannyasinam, Kvachit, Anishtam Ishtam Mishram Cha, Trivadam Karmanak Palam, Bhavatyaginam Praitya, Natu Sannyasinam Kvachit, Anishtam Ishtam Mishram Cha, Trivadam Karmanak Palam, Bhavatyaginam Praitya, Natu Sannyasinam Kvachit, Anishtam Ishtam Mishram Cha, Trivadam Karmanak Palam, Bhavatyaginam Praitya, Natu Sannyasinam Kvachit. Ishtadev. Anishtam Ishtam Mishram Cha, Trivadham Karmanak Palam, Bhavatyaginam Praitya, Natu Sannyasinam Kvachit. Want to try? Anishtam Ishtam Mishram Cha, Trivadham Karmanak Palam, Bhavatyaginam Praitya, Natu Sannyasinam Kvachit. Oh, are you senior? Go ahead. Yes, go ahead. Anishtam Ishtam Mishram Cha, Trivadam Karmanak Palam, Bhavatyaginam Praitya, Natu Sannyasinam Kvachit. Anishtam Ishtam Mishram Cha, Trivadam Karmanak Palam, Bhavatyaginam Praitya, Natu Sannyasinam Kvachit. Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Anishtam Ishtam Mishram Cha, Trivadam Karmanak Palam, Bhavatyaginam Praitya, Natu Sannyasinam Kvachit. Anishtam Ishtam Mishram Cha, Trivadam Karmanak Palam, Bhavatyaginam Praitya, Natu Sannyasinam Kvachit. Anishtam, leading to hell. Ishtam, leading to heaven. Mishram, mixed cha, and Trivadham, of three kinds. Karmanaha, of work, palam, the result. Bhavati comes, atyaginam, for those who are not renounced. Praitya, after death. Not two, but sannyasinam, for the renounced order, kvachit, at any time. Translation. For one who is not renounced, the threefold fruits of action, desirable, undesirable, and mixed, accrue after death. But those who are in the renounced order of life have no such result to suffer or enjoy. Purport. A person in Krishna consciousness acting in knowledge of his relationship with Krishna is always liberated. Therefore, he does not have to enjoy or suffer the results of his acts after death. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So, quite often you'll find that what we're reading in the morning, because we have a morning Bhagavatam class, intersects very closely with what we're reading in Bhagavad Gita, because they're dealing with the same subject matters often. And so, in the morning class, the two great sages, Angara Muni and Narada Muni, are enlightening King Chitraketu, who went through a tremendously traumatic experience. He's a very pious king, Vaishnav, and he's running his kingdom very nicely, and so everyone's prospering, and the demigods are cooperating, just like we read about Maharaj Yudhishthira's reign and so forth. But he has one big problem. He has many, many wives, maybe I should say many, 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 many wives, and he couldn't have a son. They all seemed to be barren. And so a king without a son who was going to inherit the kingdom, he was in tremendous anxiety, tremendous anxiety. So Angara Muni came, visited him, and although he's perfectly competent to impart transcendental knowledge, he saw he wasn't ready for it because he was so absorbed in this tremendous anxiety and desire to get a son. So he blessed him with, he blessed him in such a way that his favorite wife would have a son. And he gave the name for the son. His name would be Harshashoka. And Harshashoka means he's going to bring great jubilation and great lamentation. So King Chitraketu didn't worry about that. He said, well, that's true, he may be a little rebellious and so forth, so it'll be, so cool. But where's the son? So sure enough, his wife got pregnant and had this beautiful little son. And Chitraketu was overjoyed. The Harsha was there. And needless to say, his wife became even more dear to him because she had borne him a son out of all the trising. But unfortunately, the many, many, many other wives were becoming neglected. And so they became so embittered that they poisoned the son, and the son died. So the shoka kicked in tremendously. And Chitraketu was practically suicidal. He was beating his head against the wall and fainting, going on the floor. And so Angara Muni came back with Narada Muni, who doesn't go anywhere except really to preach Krishna consciousness. So they then started to enlighten him about the temporary nature of material desires and material consciousness, and the fruitlessness, or the self-defeating nature of aspiring for happiness in the material world. And he was directly experiencing that. And so he becomes enlightened, and we haven't gotten to this part yet, but he completely renounces, he takes instructions from Narada Muni, he realizes God in 7 days, and then he goes from there and eventually goes back to Godhead. So here, in this section of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is discussing 3 different functions of civilized people, which is very important to integrate into our lives. And that is yajna, dana, and tapa. Sacrifice, charity, or austerity. Because they're purifying when performed in the proper mood, in the proper consciousness. Hare Krishna. Welcome. Okay. If you like, you can sit. We have these very comfortable benches over here. Or you can sit there if you like. And we'll have a Bhagavad Gita class until 8:15, and then we'll have darshan, the deities. And here we have, you can sit here. Please, take a seat. You okay? Okay. Yeah, right there. And we have another. Watch out for the mic there. Okay. Yeah, you can sit there. Why don't you grab that book so you can follow along? We are on page 669. And we'll get another book for you. Would you like a book also? It's okay? Okay. So we're in chapter 18 of the Bhagavad Gita, which is the last chapter. And Krishna is discussing the importance of yajna, dana, and tapa. The sacrifice, charity, and austerity. And they occupy an integral part of the practice of bhakti yoga, of Krishna consciousness. But they can also be engaged in for material things. So he's describing them in different modes of nature. For instance, many of us are familiar with the tremendous austerities performed by Hiranyakashipu to become very powerful and rule the universe even more brutally. So austerities give one power for whatever reason. They increase one's determination for practicing yoga, and there are certainly austerities in Krishna consciousness. Every yoga has that. And they can also increase one's demonic power, as they did with Hiranyakashipu. He was able to rule the whole universe. From that, it became so powerful. But ultimately, he was killed by Nrsimhadev, of course. So, and dana also can be engaged in as a show in order to seem pious. The great industrialists in the early part of the 20th century, they were making millions and millions, which are a lot more valuable than in these days. You think billions and billions. And they wanted to look, kind and pious. So the was it Carnegie who did the libraries? Yes. Yeah, he was the railroad baron, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, you see? Here. Yeah, just go down that corridor. A little bit to the right, yeah. There you go. Is he going to be okay? Why don't you guide him along? And so he started this library system where we have these public libraries throughout the country, America. And he said, oh, he's very kind and nice, like that. But that's not really the purpose of charity. Charity is perfected when it's given for the propagation of Krishna consciousness, which is good for everybody, and which can give one the greatest value in life, which is that to end one's imprisonment in the material world, birth, old age, disease, and death, and go back to Godhead. So that's the best kind of charity. And it's true for austerity also. We perform austerities. Getting up early is oftentimes the first difficult austerity. Giving up things that you're attached to, that are bad for your Krishna consciousness and are proscribed, prohibited. Yeah. Have a seat. That seat is taken. You can sit here if you like. Yeah, this is the women's side. Women's side here. You can sit over there or on the bench. And what to speak of charity and sacrifice. So sacrifices, there's a whole tradition in India, karma kanda, sacrifices, in order to improve one's material position in this life, or even to go to heaven after life. But Krishna says right in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 9th chapter, that in the 7th chapter, it says, I forget how the Sanskrit goes, but he says, those benefits are temporary. Even if you go to heaven, he says you have to come back down to this world of birth and death when your piety is used up, your piety credits. So what's the point? You're just going and coming. You haven't really made any progress. So it's just another expansion of the material energy. So, but yajna, as I like to point out, Prabhupada always pointed out, in this age especially, the Sankirtan yajna is all auspicious for everybody. It purifies the heart. Liberation is gotten because you break the ties. Cheto darpanamarjanam bhava mahadava agninirvapanam. Extinguishes the blazing fire of material life. It causes the white lotus of good fortune to bloom in your own life and forever. On Saturday night, we had one of the biggest harinams we've ever had here in Pacific Beach, or in this yatra. We had a couple hundred people walking down the street and chanting Hare Krishna. And everyone was amazed. They were clapping, they were dancing, giving out books. So it's all auspicious. So all of these, the yajna, dana, and tapa, have their very important role in Krishna consciousness, but they can also be used for fruitive reasons. And then this is what is described: anishtam ishtam mishramcha. Very poetic. So, true. Anishtam means leading to hell, and ishtam means leading to heaven, and mishram means little of both. So these accrue for one who is for one who is not renounced. In other words, he's greedy for the fruits of his action, whether it be the results of yajna, dana, or tapa. They accrue after death. But those who are in the renounced order of life have no such result to suffer or enjoy. So here the renounced order of life is used in the broader sense. Those who are truly renounced, you don't have to have formally taken sannyas to be in this particular definition. Because renunciation simply means renouncing your desire to enjoy the fruits. That's the main thing. You can be very, very active. It doesn't mean becoming inactive. But like Srila Prabhupada, he worked so hard to establish temples in Vrindavan, in Bombay, and in Mayapur, right? So, and he had his disciples working like anything, collecting Lakshmi, getting donations from his contributions from his devotees in America. I remember when I was in the Brooklyn temple, we had a whole crew at that time who would go out and sell books and bring back Lakshmi, and it would go into the account, and the idea we was going to buy a temple. We're in Brooklyn, but we wanted to buy a temple in Manhattan. Now anyone who knows, Manhattan is much more expensive, so there's a lot of Lakshmi being collected and putting away. And then when we had a good amount of money, this I heard later, Prabhupada wrote them and said, now send it all to me in India. I'm going to establish a big temple in Bombay. So devotees said, oh, that's what Prabhupada wanted, fine, So they, not only they, but the LA devotees who were collecting, they then contributed tremendously to that establishment of the temple. And it wasn't easy. There was a lot of opposition, the story. There's a beautiful book written by Giriraj Swami on that called Let Me Build You a Temple. So the devotees in Bombay who were struggling so hard to keep things together, and the devotees in LA and New York and everywhere, they performed great sacrifice in the mood of sannyas. They weren't enjoying the fruits. They were doing it for Krishna, they were doing it for Prabhupada, and they felt completely fulfilled. Okay, we were going to buy a temple, now let's start over again. Prabhupada wanted... The whole point is to please Prabhupada. Prabhupada was very pleased, and then we'll go on collecting. And eventually they did get a very nice building in Manhattan, which they had for a few years, but it was so expensive to maintain. I lived there for a year. It cost $13,000 a month. This is in 1978. You can multiply by 10, what it is today, just to heat it, just to heat that 11-story building. And yeah, that was one of the main reasons. It was impossible. Anyway, but now they have a nice building in Brooklyn, which they almost gave up, but they didn't. It's flourishing very nicely. So this is what Krishna is talking about here, is the need for these three things, but to do it in a selfless manner, and then it's very purifying. Now he's going to talk about the different aspects of action. Panchaitani mahabaho karanani nabodame Sankhye Kratante Proktani Siddhaye Sarvakarminam. Almighty armed Arjuna, according to the Vedanta, there are 5 causes for the accomplishment of all action. Now learn of these for me. Purport. A question may be raised that since any activity performed must have some reaction, how is it that the person in Krishna consciousness does not suffer or enjoy the reactions of work? The Lord is citing Vedanta philosophy to show how this is possible. He says that there are 5 causes for all activities, and for success in all activities, one should consider these 5 causes. Sankhya means a discourse of knowledge, and Vedanta is the final discourse of knowledge. I think that's different what you have, right? If you read it carefully. Yeah, that's what he had. Maybe we made that correction before that one's printed. Even Sankhya accepts Vedanta Sutra as such. Therefore, such authority should be consulted. The ultimate control is invested in the super soul, as it is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Sarvasya Chaham Vidisannavishtaha, which means I am situated in everyone's heart as the super soul. Krishna is engaging everyone in certain activities by reminding him of his past actions. And Krishna conscious acts done under his direction from within yield no reaction, either in this life or in the life after death. So this is important information here. There's 5 elements of action which we're going to read about in a minute, one of which is the super soul. And so Krishna makes it very clear in the 13th chapter that he's in the heart along with the soul. There's 2 knowers of the body. Arjuna asked the question, I'd like to know then what is the Kshetrajna, the knower of the body? What is this material energy, Prakriti? What is the Purusha, the enjoyer? And I think there's another one in there, which I forget right now. But that Kshetrajna is so important. First of all, that assumes that we understand that we, the knower, are different from the Kshetra, the body. That's the first step in enlightenment, is understanding we're not the body. And if we identify ourselves with the body, then we're in ignorance and we're ensuring another birth, because we're simply trying to please the senses of the body or the mind, and that's implanting desires in for the future, and they're never fulfilled by the time we leave this body, and therefore we have to take birth again. Krishna explains that in the 15th chapter also. That the consciousness you create as you live in this life prepares your next body. That's the whole point. If you're Krishna conscious, completely Krishna conscious, you're not attached to anything here. You're attached to serving Krishna. And so you can go back to Godhead and do that for eternity and be happily fulfilled. You can never be fulfilled trying to please the senses of this body. Because, here we go, Nehi sangsparshaja bhoga dukkha yona evate. The pleasures that come from the contact of the senses with the sense objects are the very sources of our misery, in 2 ways. One is, in this very life, you can have experience. Oh, this tastes so good, and then you have your 6th or your 8th sandesh, wash it down with about 4 or 5 burfis. I used to do this as a brahmachari when I first joined, believe it or not, 50 years ago. And then you suffer for the rest of the day. I like to tell the story, the Sunday feast. We had some incredible cooks back there in Brooklyn. I mean, they were legendary. And, you work all week, and then we lived in a building that was, fairly small. I mean, Brooklyn, in New York, real estate is expensive. So we're working, we're working in the temple also, and they're cooking all day, and you just, the aromas are increasing. So anyway, the evening would come, and, we'd serve out the feast, we'd have a big kirtan, and preaching here and there. And then we'd all take prasadam, and it was very hard to completely control your senses at that point. So I remember numerous times lying in my bunk, hardly being able to breathe, I ate so much. I mean, I was a young man. I was dancing and chanting. I was healthy. And I was like, at that point, I was totally renounced. I said, never again. But next Sunday rolls around, and, that comes in. So that's the nature of it. That it's very pleasant to eat, these wonderful preps, but if you eat too much, you suffer. That's the nature of sense gratification. If you overdo it, you'll suffer in this life. And meanwhile, even if you don't overdo it, if you just regularly, act on sense gratification, you're implanting all kinds of desires. And at a certain point in this life, you can't do it anymore. You get older or sick, whatever it is. But the desire is still there. And that's in your mind. Your mind does not die when the gross body dies. The subtle body continues, carries the soul into the next body. That's a basic philosophy. So if your mind is filled with all kinds of desires to, enjoy the senses, you'll get another body. And unfortunately, in this age, because we're so ignorant, we commit sinful activities, we may very well lose the human body and go down in the species. We're still souls, we never die. Nobody dies. Nobody dies and nobody is born. Jayate mriyate va kadachan, Krishna certifies. But you'll feel like you're dying because you're identified with the body. That's a misery. The pains are there. And the birth, and that's also a very difficult situation. We forget. That's part of the verse Krishna's Prabhupada citing here. Sarvasya chaham vridisandi vishto mattak smritir jnanam apohanansha. I am situated as a super soul in everyone's heart, every organism's heart. And for me come knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So that forgetfulness makes it possible to live. Can you imagine remembering all you went through in the last birth or last births? You'd have a massive case of PTSD, which is called post-traumatic stress syndrome. What is it? Post-traumatic stress disorder, yeah. So we want to avoid all that. So Krishna is teaching us how to perform these activities in a renounced mood, and instead of developing more and more attachments for this world, we develop more and more attachments for Him and for serving Him, and become truly fulfilled and pleased. So he's going to expand on these 5 elements. Now this is the next verse. Anytime you want to ask a question, make a comment, let us know. We'll give you a mic. Text 14. Adishtanam tata karta karanam chapatag vidham vividhas chapatak cheshta daivam chaivatra panchamam. The place of action, the body, the performer, the various senses, the many different kinds of endeavor, and ultimately the supersoul. These are the 5 factors of action. The performer is the individual soul. The word adishtanam refers to the body. The soul within the body is acting to bring about the results of activity and is therefore known as the karta, the doer. That the soul is the knower and the doer is stated in the Shruti. Esha hi drashta thrashta, the Prashna Upanishad 4.9. It is also confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra by the verses Gyota Eva 2.3.18 and Karta Shastrartavatvat 2.3.33. The instruments of action are the senses, and by the senses the soul acts in various ways. For each and every action there is a different endeavor, but all one's activities depend on the will of the Supersoul, who is seated within the heart as a friend. The Supreme Lord is the super cause. Under these circumstances, he who is acting in Krishna consciousness under the direction of the Super Soul situated within the heart is naturally not bound by any activity. Those in complete Krishna consciousness are not ultimately responsible for their actions. Everything is dependent on the Supreme Will, the Super Soul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now this calls to mind a passage in the 5th chapter. Let's see, I think I know this verse. 5, 8 to 9. Let's see if I got it right. Yes. Now this is the verse describing the consciousness of an enlightened soul when he knows he's not doing anything. So it's how, but here we just said there's the doer, right? So this is a person in the divine consciousness, the translation of 5, 8 to 9. They were all together. A person in the divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all, because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects, and that he is aloof from them. So here it says that he's not doing anything. He actually does nothing at all. But in the 18th chapter, he says he's the doer. So what does that mean? How does that work? Well, it all comes back to desire. All we can do is desire. Like I like to give this example. Some of you have heard this maybe 10 times before. I want to take a drink of water, right? So the senses are telling me, you're thirsty, right? The thing goes to the brain. And I, the soul, says, okay, I want to relieve that thirst. So the desire, I want to, and just naturally the hand goes, everything moves, right, and comes in. But I'm not aware of all the things that go into making that possible, But what's happening really is the desire is understood by the super soul, And the super soul is giving instruction to the demigods in charge of all the little parts of our body. Prabhupada says even the blinking of the eyes is under a demigod. You know, we know there's certain very famous ones, Indra and Lord Shiva, who's even beyond most demigods, and Chandra and Varuna and Vayu, for every, right? They're famous ones. But there's many, many more who are in charge of little parts of the, you know, the activity in our. So all of that's going out, and they're say, okay, you know, the muscles are being moved, and I don't know how that's working, but it's working. So in one sense, I'm doing it because I'm desiring it. Just like if someone is in charge of a big, say he owns a big factory or a series of factories, so he may give the order, okay, you know, double the production of that car, you know, and it's phased that one out. So then his subordinates go and do that in order the people on the floors to enact, and so it happens. So who's doing it? Well, you have a whole series of actors, but you can say, if you want to know, yeah, you know, this magnet, they call, you know, they call him the big head of the company. He closed down that factory, he opened that one. But he didn't do it personally. He did it by his extensions, by his energies, if you will, that he commands. So that's how we are the doers. And we also become entangled in that doer, because we consider ourselves the doers. That's what the false ego is all about. I am the Purusha. I am the enjoyer. I am the owner of these things. And related my body, the extensions of my body, my bank account, all of these things. When actually we're just moving through. You know, in a second, we can be separated from this body by death, and then what happened to all that? I'm no longer the owner of this or the occupier, you see? It's all an ephemeral dream. That which is asat, which is temporary, is often said, in one sense, to not exist. It doesn't exist in the same way that the sat does, that Krishna. That's why that famous phrase, I'm sure you all know, asato ma sadgamaya, right? Don't you learn that as children? That's very, very good. Oh God, I think it is two ways of understanding it. One is an injunction, don't stay in the temporary, go to the eternal. And the other is as a prayer, oh Lord, please lead me from the temporary to the eternal, from the non-existent to the existent, from death to immortality, from darkness to light, right? And that's a very good sentiment, but we really know how to have to know how to direct that properly. So, if you want to think about how things happen, we need to have a doer, and it turns out there's two. The ultimate doer and performer is the super soul, right? He's doing everything. But we are also said to be doers, and sometimes even purushas, because we take the role of enjoyers, even though by nature we're prakriti, we're energy. And that calls to mind another one of my favorite verses in the 13th chapter. And this is so important for being aware of how we can tailor our activities to progress in our quest to get free of the bonds of material nature. So he says there in the 13th chapter, I forget the number of the verse, but he says, Purusha prakatisto hi bhunkte prakati jan gunan karanang gurasangosya sadasadyoni janmasu. This is such an enlightening verse. So the Purusha, the soul acting as the enjoyer, known as the Purusha in the body. Prakriti stohi, we're in the material energy, composed of this body and its whole world, right? Prakriti stohi. Bhunkte, now here bhunkte often means enjoy, but it can also mean just experience. Because that includes the negative reactions of sinful activity and the pleasant reactions of pious activity. So bhunkte prakriti jan gunan karanang gunasangasa. So he's experiencing the prakriti jan gunan, the three modes of material nature that are generated from the material energy. We're acting that. We can experience that. Just like I'm walking over here. I was walking kind of fast because I was late. But some fellow, and this happens every summer now, he had, maybe he took off the muffler in his car, or they modify it in such a way that it makes even a greater noise than if it, isn't it? It was just, I said, isn't that illegal? You know? And it's a game. They run down a street very loudly, and if some of the car alarms go off, then that's their sense gratification. Isn't it? I mean, it was so, you know. And so that, you know, that's his recreation. Well, you know, it's going to get that's going to be a sinful reaction coming for that one. You're causing pain unnecessarily to people, you know. So that's the mode of ignorance. Enjoying giving pain to others is lower mode of ignorance, and it's ensuring a very bad reaction, right? Unfortunately, it's a thing now, you know, and it's very dangerous. So so we are determining our fate. What this verse says in the 13th chapter, we are the Purusha within the material energy, and we're interacting with the material nature. As we do that under the modes of nature, we determine sadasad yoni janma. So here's the sadasad again. We determine our good or bad births. Are we going to be born? The best birth is in a family of devotees, you know. Well, if you're a devotee and you don't make it back to Godhead, you don't achieve purity and perfection, then nothing is lost. This is you know, it's like the greatest investment. Invest in Krishna consciousness, because you never lose it. Neha brikramanashosti, there's no loss or diminution. So if you do that, then you'll maybe take a birth in a devotee family, which is so, you know. But if you don't, and you interact in a different way according to the lower modes of nature, then you'll get a bad birth. Means you may lose human birth, or even if, you know, it's a bad situation. So we are determining our fate with everything we do at every moment during our waking hours. We're forming our consciousness. And as Krishna says, yang vapi smarang bhavam jajachante kalevaram tam tamevaiti kontaya sadatad bhavata. Whatever is the most prominent thought in our minds when we finally leave this body, we don't die, but we leave the body, that will determine our next birth. And if you can remember me, says Krishna, antakali, at the end time of the body, the death, antakali to mama smaran mukva kalevanam yak priyati samad bhavam yastinat yatra sankhya. There's no doubt, he says. If you remember me, then you come to me. So we want to do everything we can before then, like right now, to increase our chances of remembering Krishna. So if we're remembering him all the time and working for him and aspiring and sacrificing and performing austerities for him, then we have a much better chance of doing that. If not, we'll get born in a nice devotee family, and we'll maybe 1 or 2 births later. So there's no loss, no diminution in this Krishna consciousness. So that's going on. Okay, at 8 o'clock. Any comments or questions on these 5 elements of action? Okay. So, yes, sir.
Can we identify the consciousness or the soul with our brain? Because instructions we receive from the brain, apparently. Now, can we identify this brain with the soul?
No. The soul is different from the brain. The brain is an incredibly complex machine, but it's matter. And they haven't figured out how it works yet, you know. But the soul is conscious, and the mind, which is also subtle matter, that is the agent through which the soul works. The consciousness is manifest through the brain, and it acts through the senses. And the brain, as we know, it can be damaged over time, and Alzheimer's, whatever, So therefore, you don't experience your consciousness like you were before, and it can be very frustrating and depressing. So the brain is very important, and only in the human form of life do we have such an incredible brain where we can become self-aware. We can ask, who am I really? What's the ultimate goal of life? Is there a God? The cats and dogs can't do that. They have a brain, but it's very rudimentary. Yeah. So the brain is not the soul. Even after the death of the body, which means the death of the brain, the soul continues. And the consciousness is also there, the mind is there. But we can use, just like we can use our hands to serve Krishna, we can use our brain to serve Krishna.
But consciousness, is it similar to soul?
Consciousness is purely spiritual. It's not the brain, but it manifests.
That's right. But is it similar to what you call soul?
Is it what?
Consciousness and soul.
Yeah, they're not synonymous.
Synonymous, but similar.
The soul is the symptom of the soul's presence is consciousness. So the soul is conscious, but it's not consciousness. And Prabhupada gives the example. It's actually in the Gita that your consciousness spreads throughout the body. Avinashi tatot buddhi yena sarvam vidam tatam. That which is spread throughout the body, which is consciousness, is indestructible. That's, you see?
Then super consciousness, is it the soul?
It depends on what you mean. Super consciousness, you can say, is inherent in the super soul. There's two souls in the body. God is there in our hearts. He's trying to speak to us. There's the Upanishads. It's also in the Bhagavatam in the 11th canon. The analogy in the Upanishads, there's two birds in the tree of the body. There's the soul and the super soul. The individual bird, the individual soul, is trying to enjoy the fruits on the tree, which is a sense gratification. And the other bird is just watching, the super soul. He's not entangled. He's watching, keeping track, and trying to give good instruction. This is the thing. Krishna is trying to instruct us, but we can't hear him in our conditioned state. Soul, the super soul, comes outside as the acharya, the realized soul, and he comes outside as his book. This Bhagavad Gita, the super soul is trying to talk to us right now and give us good instruction.
Thank you so much, sir.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. All right, we have a minute or two, so I'll go on. Text 15. Shariravam manobhiryat karmam prarabhate naraha nyayam va vipaditam va panchayate tatsya hetavaha. Whatever right or wrong action a man performs, that means a human being, whatever right or wrong action a man performs by body, mind, or speech is caused by these 5 factors. Purport. The words right and wrong are very significant in this verse. Right work is work done in terms of the prescribed directions in the scriptures, and wrong work is work done against the principles of the scriptural injunctions. But whatever is done requires these 5 factors for its complete performance. Now, I'd like to just bring this back to the theme of the last chapter and the very end of the 16th chapter, which I always thought is a very significant little lesson there. The end of the 16th chapter, some of you may know, the divine and demonic qualities. That's what the 16th chapter is about. The beginning is a long list of divine qualities we should try to cultivate. But then most of the chapter is devoted to demonic qualities. And Krishna describes how someone who's like, he pretends to be a demon at one point. And he has this line that he says, here's a typical demon speaking. Ishvaroham, aham bhogi, siddhoham, balavan sukhi. I am the controller, Ishvaroham. I am the enjoyer. I am perfect, powerful, and happy. And don't you forget it, This is the demon. So Krishna's pretending like that. So Krishna says, I slammed, them. There's so many demons he killed in Vrindavan, and Ram killed Ravana and Nrsingadev, So there's always a struggle between the devotees and the demons, who's going to. So but the thing is that the demonic nature is also within us. In other words, we can go that route if we neglect the scriptures. And this is what Krishna says at the end. He says, these demons, I eventually put them into a hellish condition and suffering. Not for eternity, but so they'll learn, But then he says, Trivadam narakasedam dwaram nashanam atmana. Kama krodas tata lobas tasmareta trayanta jait. There's 3 gates leading to this hellish life. Lust, anger, and greed. You see? And the wise person gives those up. And then he says, one who was, I forget to say, one who has given up, who has avoided these 3 gates of hell, gates to hell, performs activities conducive to elevation and achieves the highest goal. So this is the thing. We can either pave our way toward more suffering and hellish punishment, or we can accept the injunctions of the Shastra and mold our life in that way and move toward perfection. So then he says, Yak Shastra Vinamutsaja Vartate Kamakata. Now he's talking about Shastra. He says, where is that instruction that can guide us how we can act in such a way to not only avoid hell, but move toward the most auspicious destination, the kingdom of God. So he says, well, Yak Shastra Vinamutsaja Vartate Kamakata Nasa Siddham Avapnoti Nasukam Napadam Gatim. Those who disregard the injunctions of the Shastra, beginning with Bhagavad Gita, and continue to act according to their whims, they don't get perfection, they don't get happiness, they certainly don't achieve the supreme goal. Therefore, the last verse of the chapter, Tasmat Shastram Pramanam Te Karya Karya Bhavastito Gyatva Shastra Vedanoktam Karma Karta Miharasi. Therefore, one should accept the Shastra, the revealed Shastra, as given by the great acharyas who know and live the Shastra, by Bhagavad Gita as it is. Tasmat Shastra Pramana. Pramana is a very important word. It means evidence you accept to guide your life, the do's and the don'ts. And that's what he says. Pramanam te karya akarya. What you should do and what you should not do. You know? And having understood that, one should actually accept as a matter of duty to perform those activities that are conducive to elevation and to avoid those activities that aren't. And that's what Prabhupada's whole movement is about. He works so hard to write these books, get them printed, get distributed, and to have his devotees read them and study them and live by them. That's a very important part. And so that's what we're doing here. I've been trying to maintain this class. And now I see we have a packed crowd. Sometimes we have 3, sometimes 4, now we have 12, I don't know. Plus our guests online, they're out there. So anyway, it's caused by these 5 factors, but how to act in the body in such a way that we're elevated, that's instruction is abounding in the Bhagavad Gita and the other books that Srila Prabhupada gave us. The Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Nectar of Devotion, and others. So we should accept that, and we can elevate ourselves. And one of the most important aspects is studying the Bhagavad Gita. So we've just been doing that. Thank you. You're all invited again tomorrow night. And we're going to start a new program, by the way, if you're interested. We're going to start recording some of my poetry. This was at the request of a night's devotee named Jugal Kishore. So the last 15 minutes or so, we'll have a little recording session, and that'll be on Wednesdays. But we'll have a class also, so we'll continue. All right, and in 4 minutes, we'll have Kirtan. Please stay and see the beautiful Radha Giridhari. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Bol.